next guest is another awesome woman, the co-founder of haenke Botanical Lab in Prague, Alexandra Střelcová.
Hello. So it was really interesting, Alex. I didn't know many of the things that I actually did know a lot of things that obviously I know your work, but I didn't know many of the things that you were describing that are super interesting, and I might actually follow up on that and put things in a little bit of context, because I also
For sure you would.
I also had like half an hour to prepare. However, I hope it will at least, you know, help contextualize a little bit the world of plants. What you can see here, I mean, this was our first project actually 4 years ago, exactly 4 years ago, where we put like, around 1,000 plants in these frames, and white frames in the National Theatre Plaza in Prague, which is basically a space where people only pass by. It's in the center of Prague. It's like super gray. All around is it's surrounded by amazing architecture. One of the not actually hidden gems, one of the gems of Prague's architecture, the brutal Nova Scena building, and obviously the National Theatre building. This brutally changed the actual way how people perceiving the space. So all of a sudden, when we installed the thing, it took around a couple of hours. Once we started installing the frames, all of a sudden we realized that people were basically stopping by, and they all of a sudden were, sitting down, or throughout the month that the installation was there, it was called Victoria Pragensis. We realized that people were sitting down, they had meetings there, and they were actually observing the plants, they were learning about them. And somehow it kind of, created this buzz also through the topic of what greenery what greenery means in public space, which is also, by the way, what we wanted. So that's great. Also, I have to mention that it was designed by Juraj Lasovský, an architect who is our friend, lives in Denmark right now. But so this is how we started, and I'm just not going to bother you with like many of these the projects, but for those who kind of aren't aware of what we do, our mission is really to kind of pick out topics that are related to plants and their uses in our daily lives, from anything, architecture, fashion, medicine, design, you name it, food as well, and then basically put them into another context and kind of introduce all the amazing functions and uses and historical connotations that plants have, and introduce them to people who predominantly live in cities, obviously, who might be aware of plants, who maybe have a plant or two, or maybe a couple of hundreds as it happens, in their homes, but also they are vivid fans of medicinal plants, etc. So we try to like bring it to another perspective and show how amazing plants can be, what it can actually, what they can bring, also in terms of like innovations, etc. And obviously, work with communities a lot. So we do a lot of talks and installations like that. A few years ago, actually, this was in Brno. I think my talk really is about like a lot of concepts that are related to the use of plants in indoor space mainly. This thing was called Plant Lover, actually, #PlantLover. And we recreated this sort of living room of a no-name house plant lover in a gallery in Brno. The argument was that around the time there were a lot of articles, especially in like the US kind of UK media, that were talking about how people turn to houseplants because they basically postpone kids, they postpone marriages because they can't really afford it. And pets are also quite expensive right now, especially when you live in cities like New York or London. And there's not enough greenery in terms of public spaces. So people just go buy some houseplants, and then, these are the new pets and these are the new kids, because basically they can't really afford anything else in their lives. So we kind of brought that to Brno. And with this project, we kind of asked also people around Czech Republic, and to kind of corroborate, or obviously, work with the hypothesis as well, like whether this argument could be also valid in the Czech Republic. Obviously, it was not really that valid. Gentrification is a problem as well in cities around Czech Republic, but I guess it's not such a big phenomenon such as in cities, such as New York or London. However, it did kind of quite a lot of lovely insight into the lives of people who are around 20, to 30, and who have a lot of plants, and they kind of obviously live with them. They're surrounded by them at home, but they're also surrounded them in the offices. I'll go back to that later. Another thing which we do quite a lot actually, so we work with a lot of communities, so from refugee camps to nursery care homes. We do a lot of projects that are basically aimed at bringing greenery to places where there are disadvantaged communities that don't have really access to nature, to greenery indoors. So we try to do that. This used to be our plant shop in Prague, Žižkov quarter. We decided not to continue with the plant shop because, to be fair, we don't really want to be defined by the plant shop. Business was going really well, but we kind of thought it might be time to dedicate to other things. There is a lot of things that, all in all, in our work, we do a lot of things around indoor and plants. My favorite, or one of my favorite authors, Oliver Sacks, said in one of his articles, I think, that music and gardens and music or greenery are one of the two things that he's seen, and he's got evidence that are something that is not pharmaceutical, but it does help people kind of relieve their stress or mental health issues. Obviously, if you are suffering from mental health issues, you can obviously turn to plants, but you should also try consulting a professional, by the way. But some of those concepts, I think it would be nice to just briefly go through. Because I thought, and I find them really interesting, biophilia is one of them. So you've got Edward R. Wilson, who in 1984, coincidence, I don't think so, published a book called Biophilia, in which he kind of articulates that he says that biophilia is the innate tendency to focus on life and lifelike processes, basically meaning that people, or humankind, is destined to love or to be around nature, and it kind of all evolves around nature anyway, because we come from nature. And even though we kind of did build cities, we're still kind of innately or naturally inclined to greenery. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you guys might, are pretty aware or are even working with biophilic design. I think what is more interesting is whether that kind of translates, or in what context that kind of translates to office spaces, which I kind of thought was the topic, the main topic of today's talk. So there are a few concepts or leads, maybe obviously you may have heard of the NASA Clean Air study, which was also done I think in the 80s or the end of the 1980s. Where NASA basically was studying a few plant species, and the outcome was that there are indeed a few plant species that can indeed absorb some of the negative ingredients that the air has, or indoor air has. Obviously, this was then used by the growers all around the world, especially in Holland, and in the biggest powers in terms of growing houseplants, or flowers in general, because that kind of gave them an excuse to sell even more. Although currently yeah, there is still a lot of talk about whether that study is actually valid because, well, for one thing, it was done in vacuum. So, you know, later studies kind of did indeed say, well, yeah, the plants, they kind of clean air, but at the same time, if you want your plants to clean your air indoors, like really, you would probably have to have like 10,000 plants per square meter. So it's probably not going to be really possible. So I think what is more important, and also for us, you know, from our own experience, from our own work, is kind of more that psychological, mental health kind of angle, whereby plants really do make you happier, or make the environment where you work happier. And I think obviously, you know, one possibility could be that kind of biophilic inclination, you know, to all things green, etc. Obviously, there's many studies or many approaches that kind of say why that is. But I think basically, yes, this is something that, you know, people have been always inclined to, you know, having nature around them and kind of taking care of that nature, you know, even if it's a small pot with one small plant. I haven't seen many people who, you know, if you give them this plant and you put them in on their desk, they will take care of it no matter what, because, you know, it's a piece of nature. Before I wrap up, I think what we have been really noticing in obviously COVID era is that many people obviously stayed home in the first wave, and they kind of started not only taking up bread making classes, but also you know, their houseplant collection did and was enlarged quite a lot. So and I also think this has many things to do with not only their work environment, because obviously homes have become offices, but also the mental health kind of angle, where you know, people kind of naturally felt like they had to surround themselves with more plants. Yeah, obviously beams came shortly after that, and the internet reacted. Yeah, I think I'm not going to bother you with history, but basically, you know, you have like all this kind of urban jungle Instagram aesthetics where, you know, you share pictures of your monster on Monday, etc. And, you know, there is a lot of the community is really, really big, I think. Also quite inclusive. Before I wrap up, I think I wanted to just talk about future trends, which are really interesting, because I think, you know, it kind of goes two ways. I think that in terms of, I'm going to stop sharing anyway, because I think in terms of plants in interiors, not many people have actually started to using it anyway, you know, like I haven't, there obviously is, like, if you go on design media, etc., you will see plenty of example how plants are put in, like, the projects as well. But I don't think that the topic has found a way into like mainstream discourse. So I think there's a lot of work on that as well. And in terms of kind of where the community is heading, or where the trends are heading, I think because plants are obviously notorious for their non-ability to maintain, or, you know, like they're like pretty, you know, you have to maintain them, you have to take care of them, or you have to hire somebody to take care of them. So, you know, there are these like 4 plants, and again, like the trend is coming again from the 90s, where people kind of figured out, after all the boom in 70s, people figured out that, oh, we have to really kind of take care of the plants, so it takes money and, you know, and effort and time, etc. So I think that the 4 plant kind of trend is coming again. And on the other hand, obviously, sustainability and this kind of like, you know, eco-friendly thinking is entering this kind of industry as well, because at least from my experience, I'm always really amazed how full of contrast the industry is. On one hand, obviously, you know, you are like bringing greenery to spaces, but on the other hand, it's basically depleting the ecosystem, and there are obviously a lot of troubles and issues around like how plants are grown, etc. I'm going to go like that deep into it, but anyway, I think so. Yeah, so like these two future trends that I can definitely see that we might be, you know, having more discussions in the future about whether which kind of way we should go. But yeah, so these are my musings. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha, for the things to think about. We are regarding plants in the office. We have quite a lot of plants in the office, and I cannot put my finger on if it's helping or not. But I was just thinking about it and looking at Nikki behind her. We have a wall full of plants that she takes care of most of the time, or all of the time. And I don't know if they directly impact you, but I have a feeling that they are like kind of like a positive person in the room all the time. You know, so no matter if you're in a bad mood or whatever is the vibe, the plants are just there, always happy. You know, they need you to take care of them, but they're always like there and fresh and green and growing. So they're giving you like a kind of like a positive spin on the day. You don't notice them, but they're around and they're happy. You know, they're not objects. Objects don't have any like reaction whatsoever. But I think that's something it cannot be scientifically kind of proven, maybe, but they have this inner character of positiveness. But that's just my maybe full of sun brain thinking about it. What do you think?
You could like you know, because in my background is in music or in culture, and I can, you know, there are definitely a lot of like, you know, things that plants or nature and culture have in common. And this being said, is like they kind of stir emotions, you know, like you listen to music and it kind of it gives you vibes, you know, but you look at a plant and it also kind of like provokes something in you, you know what I mean? So I think, yeah.
Okay, so it's not a stoned talk. You think it makes sense?
Yeah.